Uri namake uri namake uri ja upaya
Hello, everyone. My name is Yeb Sanyo, and welcome to all of you who are tuning in today to our village, Nuestra Aldea, Nuestra Aldea. Dear friends, fellow travelers, lovers of nature and people, sisters and brothers in solidarity, a pleasant day to all of you, and please allow me to extend to all of you greetings of peace. Kindly allow me to start with some housekeeping items, as we always do in these online platforms that I think all of us have gotten used to in previous weeks. So, as an online event, I request all of our panelists, of course, to please speak very clearly and deliberately and slowly if you can, as we are doing multi-language translation for our wonderful event today. And for all of our attendees, participants out there joining us, if you have any comments or questions, please use the Q&A feature. And there is that button with Q&A there. Please press that button and put in your comments. We are doing translations in Spanish, Portuguese, and English, and you can use that translation feature of Zoom as you wish. All of the conversations we're going to have today will be recorded, and we are featuring all of these conversations and this event live. So bear with us as well, and please enjoy, and I hope you enjoy this session here in our village. Now, also happening as we embark on this panel is an art exercise, and behind me is my brother AG. AG, say hello. Hello. Hola. Yeah. And while we are going through this amazing friends and people who are going to share with us their ideas and insights on what brings us together, on community-based thinking, and giving us insights around resilience in this time of crisis, AG would be creating an artwork just behind me. And for those who don't know AG yet, he is a world-renowned artist, a street artist, and he has done thousands of murals around the world on the environment, on peace and human rights. And we look forward to his creation today. I think he's going to feature the idea of the guardians of the forest looking up to the sky, which I hope would give us a lot of inspiration, not just today, but beyond. Now, I want to welcome all of you to our village, dear friends. This is truly a special moment in our collective history and journey, and it is truly a distinct honor for me to be guiding you through this day's wonderful conversation here at our village. Our village is about connectivity, it's about networking, it's about solidarity, and we are focusing, of course, on things that could create for us a better future, solutions for a world, not just for a world that is currently in this global health crisis, but a world that is facing a lot of challenges in the context of our ecology, in the context of how our indigenous sisters and brothers are confronting the issues that they deal with on a daily basis, especially in their communities. The event today and overall our village is organized by If Not Us Then Who, our friends from If Not Us Then Who, with the partnership with a Hip Hop Caucus. Hello to our friends from the Hip Hop Caucus and the Guardians of the Forest. The Guardians of the Forest are indigenous peoples and communities from many places around the world, the Amazon Basin, Brazil, Indonesia, and Mesoamerica, and they represent the guardians of over 400 million hectares of tropical forests around the world. They advocate for the respect of territorial rights and the inclusion of their demands in global negotiations on climate change and forests. The Alliance is made up of the following organizations: the Indigenous Peoples Alliance of the Archipelago, or AMAN, the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests, Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, and the Coordinator of Indigenous Organizations of the Amazon Basin. As I mentioned earlier, this is being shown live and it will be free-flowing, and we hope you enjoy this session. You see now that AG is drawing a face there, and we very much look forward to how that would look like at the end of this whole conversation. Now, without much further ado, we now go to the first panel, and it talks about what brings us together as a people, as communities, from space to cities and the forests. The panel that's going to start soon will discuss how spirituality, community-based thinking, and scientific endeavors help us understand the critical role of people in healing our only home, our planet. Your host for this panel is Caitlin Yarnall, the Senior Vice President and Chief Storytelling Officer of the National Geographic. thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy today's sessions. Over to you now, Caitlin.
Thank you, Yeb. It's great to be here with all of you. And as Yeb said, my name is Caitlin, and I'm the Chief Storytelling Officer at National Geographic. At National Geographic, we use the power of science, education, and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonder of the world. And I'm hoping today that we're going to talk about wonder and maybe a little bit about protection. And it's my pleasure to be joined by three luminaries. These three amazing women are big thinkers. Through their work and their worldviews, they embody connectivity, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say today. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction for each one of them, and then we'll jump into conversation. First, Ruka Sambolingi is the first female Secretary General of the Indigenous Peoples Alliance of the Archipelago, also known as AMAN. And it's the world's largest Indigenous peoples organization. She represents over 18 million Indigenous people. Ruka is a Torojan from the highlands of Sulawesi, Indonesia, which, for those of you who haven't been able to see it from space or from Google Maps, is a starfish-shaped island the size of Florida. Next, we have Dr. Jessica Meyer, who's a NASA astronaut. During her first spaceflight, she conducted the first 3 all-women spacewalks with a crewmate, totaling 21 hours and 44 minutes. She spent 205 days in space, completed 3,280 orbits of Earth, and a trip of 86.9 million miles, and just returned to all of us here on Earth in April of this year. And then finally, Audrey Kitagawa is the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Parliament of the World's Religions. She's the president founder of the International Academy for Transcultural Cooperation, the president of the Light of Awareness International Spiritual Family, and the current chair of the UN Task Force of the Parliament of the World's Religion. Ladies, it's great to have you here with me. And the audience may be wondering why we've chosen to assemble an astronaut, an Indigenous leader, a religious leader. They seem to work in very different spheres. And while on the surface, they may seem different, by the nature of their work and the physical positions they've been in, I think that they view the world holistically. And so today we're hoping to explore the themes of perspective, scale, and community. And Ruka, I'd like to start with you. What do you think is unique about how Indigenous people see the world? And why is it important for all of us to understand
that? Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good evening from Indonesia. In Toraja, my greetings. We say Manasu Moraka. Manasu Moraka means have the food ready. So that's how important food in our existence as a Toraja, because it's becoming our greetings. Yeah, when we talk about what uniques of Indigenous peoples and the needs also to others to understand is, as in many what we call cosmology of Indigenous peoples, we see the world is not just a flat or just as the physical world, but we are being part of the universe. We live with our ancestor spirits. We have different places with them. We are equal with our animal and our plants. In my belief as a Toraja, the very traditional one, ancient belief, saying that we are siblings, we are triplets. So first is human being, and then animals and the plants, and these three are siblings, and we need to take care of each other. These are the very fundamental relations between our environment, between our world, even between the universe and then the spirit world, that sometimes the what so-called the modern thinking cannot accept. The new way of seeing things cannot accept, because they cannot prove it like scientifically. They cannot touch the spirit. They cannot see the spirits. They cannot measure the spirits. But this belief system is actually the underlying reasons of us as one family of the Mother Earth here in this globe. When we say, for example, we live with our ancestor spirits and also some of the guardian angels and spirits. They have different places. They have specific places, for example, in the forest, in the jungle, or in some sacred places. That's why it is very important to protect our forest, not just because of the trees, but we protect the forest together with the spirits. So that's how our existence, our way of life and way of thinking and way of seeing our very existence, and not just us as indigenous peoples that we see that's supposed to be like that, but all of us in this planet. And these are the challenges that we are facing now, because we see more and more and more and more, even during the time of the crisis, we still see forests are being cut everywhere. Just in last few days, when our indigenous sisters and brothers in central Kalimantan are fighting to defend their ancestral territories, their forest, customary forests being taken away for oil palm plantations, because they do believe that it's not only for them, but also for the generation to come. So these are the whole thing that I think I cannot say very unique, but that's just the way we are. That's just the way we are. And for us, protecting ourselves, it is not just protecting ourselves, but this is actually, we try to nurture the Mother Earth, and in that way, we can also contribute to protect not just the Mother Earth, but also the other human being. So if you protect me, if you help to protect indigenous peoples, you are not just protecting indigenous peoples, but you are also protecting yourself and your generations to come. And I think this point has to be understood, because some people, they think that we only want our forest for ourselves. That is not the case. I think that's the challenge that we are facing now, and I'm very glad that we have the spiritual leaders here for this very moment. I think our main challenge, also from what we call here in Indonesia, is the big religions, because they've been the one who play a very big role in how you call it, in contributing to the eroding value of indigenous peoples, because they all consider, oh, you cannot live in that belief anymore. And it's also I feel very blessed to this evening here in Indonesia, because astronaut is here, and because as a Toraja, we believe our ancestor coming from the sky in the boat. We used to joke, so it's like, what kind of rope they use when they coming down from the sky. So I think the universe is aligned at this very moment, and that's why I think we need to really discuss a lot of things, and how we better protect our forests, we better protect our nature, we better protect our Mother Earth, because that's the only home we have anyway. So that's this collective action together, not just among indigenous peoples. We have proven that our systems, the collective protections, the collective decision-making processes are the one that is very resilient, especially during the pandemic that is going on now. So I think we need to, as we see our life beyond COVID, beyond the pandemic, we need to find what we call the fair and just living together as the citizen of the planet. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruka. And because you brought it up, I'm going to now turn to Jessica. I'd love to hear your reflections on what Ruka just said, and also personally, I just want to hear, how did space travel alter or expand or contract your thinking about the planet and its interconnectivity? And just one quick reminder to my fellow panelists, we've been asked to speak a little slower for the translators. So Jessica, love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Ruka. Good morning, everybody. It's really an honor to be here, and this is so refreshing for me to be a part of this enlightening conversation. It is a little bit outside of the norm of all of the interviews and appearances we are often asked to do as astronauts. And so this is something that's very important to me, and environmentalism and conservation has always been something that's been paramount in my life before becoming an astronaut as well. And so it's wonderful to be here today. I really liked to hear how Ruka was talking about things as everything on the planet being so interconnected with the siblings of the animals and the plants. I really love that image. And I can absolutely say that when you have the privilege of looking down on the planet, as I was so fortunate to have for 7 months, it is very, very easy to see that what she says is true. It is so easy to see from that outside vantage point that this really is one home for all of us, that everything is truly interconnected, just as Ruka was describing, not just for one group of peoples, but for everybody on the planet, including the plants and the animals, which really are all part of our grand ecosystem on this planet, and none of us can exist alone. I know scientifically that that is absolutely true. So I really loved how she captured that sentiment of it not just being for one group of people or for one local area, because all of our actions as individuals truly do have ramifications to everybody else far outside of our little sphere. And when you're looking down at the planet from space, you can see how interconnected the land masses are and all of the oceans. And you don't see those man-made political boundaries that we have imposed on ourselves and on each other as humans. All of those are missing because those are really just man-made constructs. And you can see that we are all inhabitants of this same planet. And that was something that I had thought about before, but really resonated much more loudly when I finally saw it from my own eyes, that we are truly all in this together. And that's something that came to have an even stronger and stronger meaning for me throughout my mission. I had always thought of it that way from the environmental standpoint, and looking back at the Earth, seeing those interconnected land masses and oceans, seeing the very thin, tenuous band of an atmosphere, it really does make you understand how special, how beautiful our planet is, and that it is incredibly fragile, and that we need to protect it because it is our one true home for all 7.5 billion humans on the Earth. When you're one of 3 or 6 humans that's currently off the Earth, that really just does have a way of sinking in and making you understand that. As I went through my mission, of course, when I launched, there was no such thing, or actually there probably was a such thing, but we hadn't really all heard of it yet in terms of COVID-19. And when my crewmates and I were up there on the space station, we saw all of that unfolding beneath us. And once again, that sentiment rang true in understanding that we are truly all in this together, all of us. All 7.5 billion humans are currently affected by this pandemic. For a short time, we were the only 3 humans that were not affected by it while we were still in space. And that was a very strange and quite surreal feeling. So something that we're truly still adjusting to as we came back to the planet right in the middle of it all, and have only been back here for about 2 months now. And now, as with things in my own country, with the state of civil unrest, and more voices being heard in terms of equal representation, particularly in the United States, it once again rings true when I think about that image of looking down on the planet and knowing that we are all in this together. And that's something that I just feel like I wish so desperately that I could share with everybody. And I'm trying to share my photos and videos and experiences in space, but I think it really is something different when you experience it with your own eyes. I wish that I could transport every human's eyes up to space to look down on the planet and to understand and start to comprehend what that feels like, it really does change you as a person. There's even something that's called the overview effect, which Frank White wrote about. And it was a deep explanation about how you're truly changed as a person when you have that opportunity to look down on the planet from the outside. And I'll wrap up by saying, describing one of the moments and one of the images that was really important to me growing up. And that was the iconic Earthrise photo from the Apollo 8 mission. I'm sure you've all seen this photo before. It was one that Bill Anders took, Apollo astronaut, when they were looking back at the Earth from the perspective of the moon. And that was a very, very important image, because until that time, human eyes had never seen the Earth from above. I think that's difficult for kids growing up now to understand, because they've always seen images of the Earth from the outside. And we'd seen some satellite imagery before, but never before with human eyes during those Apollo missions. And that image was absolutely pivotal in helping to shape the environmental movement, because it allowed people to gain a little bit of that perspective, even though they weren't seeing it with their own eyes, like I was so lucky to experience. They could still start to appreciate more how beautiful, how precious and fragile the Earth was. And that really did resonate with people all around the world, and really did help kick off the environmental movement. So I hope that the perspective that I had, and that others that are other astronauts and cosmonauts and space explorers have had, that we can bring that back to people and help them understand and relate that it truly is not just our own actions affecting our own local peoples that matters in the grand scheme. It affects everyone, and that affects us again. So even if you're only thinking about this from a selfish standpoint, it still will affect you in the end, because I think, as Ruka so beautifully captured, we are completely interconnected as citizens of the planet, and we really need to nurture this Mother Earth.
Thank you, Jessica. Those are beautiful thoughts. And I know that Earthrise image definitely resonated with me as a kid. And I'm curious to see what the image will define this generation, right? That's living in this very, I think, historical moment right now. A reminder to the audience to put your questions in through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We already have 8 in there. And we're going to turn now to Audrey before we get to your questions. Audrey, you've listened to Ruka and Jessica talk about the interconnectedness of our planet, whether you're, have your feet firmly planted on the forest floor, or you're floating above us. I'm wondering, how do religions make sense of this? I know that is a huge question, and I'm asking you to speak for billions of people and many traditions and many faiths. But what would you say is the through line, the definitional thing that we can all learn from our spiritual leaders? I think you're muted, Audrey. If you could just unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this fascinating conversation with these fascinating ladies. And I consider it a great privilege to be here with each and every one of you. So thank you so much. Yes, we are on a huge topic now, of course, historically as well as contemporarily. And so, basically though, what we are talking about, each of us from our different perspectives, is the underlying unitive consciousness that arises from the sacred ground of being. So whether it's from the indigenous people and their understanding that our connection to nature and the environment and the spirit that lives in each and every plant and animal, really is inherently speaking about the sacredness of life. And when Jessica is in space and she is seeing how we are all one earth and we are all in this together, it is a statement that our planet is our common home. And religions and spirituality tries to help us find that common ground of morality. And that is a sacred ground of being, which we all inherently recognize, because there is the recognition that our lives itself is sacred. So whether it is the life of an animal, the life that exists in the plant, the life that exists in every human being, and in all kingdoms, whether it's the animal kingdom, mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, and the human realm, we are all gifted with sacred, immortal, eternal life that comes from a sacred source. And there is an inherent recognition of that. And what brings us together, because this is an important conversation of how, with all of the external polarizations that are going on that we perceive, how do we actually come together? First, let us recognize that in the truest sense of the word, the sacred life that is gifted to each and every one of us is the one great life coming from the one great source and the divine creator of all there is. And so when we understand that that is a fundamental basis out of which all of life arises and to which all of life ultimately returns, then we are starting with the important essence and truth of our foundation and the essence of who we are as sacred beings having sacred life. So when we take on form and structure, we see the particularity of individuation. And that necessarily comes about when we take on identifiable form and structure. So suddenly I have a human form and structure, and we have the five senses, the five elements, and we are informed within the context of our cultural upbringing and all of our life experiences. So our perceptual field is necessarily limited to whatever information and processes that we are going through to understand life. And man's search is inherently the search for that common ground of being, that common morality, that finding the answer to that perennial question, who am I? And in that inner search, that deep, deep self-reflection, we do come to this understanding that peoples everywhere in their common search and their connection with nature come to that recognition of that fundamental ground of being. And as people and all of life, I had the privilege of having a wonderful, enlightened spiritual mother who told me that our true purpose in life is God realization. So this is very succinctly said, is to find what I have spent the last few minutes trying to talk about in words about that common ground of sacred being. And she said, God is love. So that speaks to our capacity to really love and the actual implementation and practice of the actualization of the living reality of the divine creator here and now, because where we are is the holy ground, and we must be able to realize the divinity now. And so we actually have the capacity to realize the living reality of the divine presence through every loving thought, loving speech, and loving word. Because, in the seemingly ordinariness of daily life is the grandeur and the magnificence of life, and the precious opportunity that we have to actualize the living reality of all that is sacred by how we think, how we speak, and how we act. So this becomes the practice ground for all of us to be able to ultimately come to that state of transcendence. And in that transcendence, we know that we are one. There is no separation. And the glue that holds all of us together is that essence of deep, pure, perfect, unconditional love. And what the role of religions does is help us in trying to find the different ways that we express our common morality through ethical values, principles, behaviors, and actions. But beneath all of that, and the external ways in which we try to come to the inherent understanding of who we are, is this other fact that my spiritual mother also said to me, you are a perfect child of God, immortal, eternal, and already in the light. And all of the sacred journey of life is to be able to come to that realization.
That's beautiful, Audrey. I think I could spend a few hours unpacking that in my mind. I want to ask specifically now about environmental challenges and the way that we seem to sometimes tackle them individually, but I think we all know that we need to be thinking about them and working on them collectively. And Ruka, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You've spoken so eloquently about how Indigenous peoples and your people see the planet as one family, one system. How have you worked collectively and perhaps with other Indigenous groups far away or close by to tackle some of the environmental threats? I'd love to hear specifically about some Indigenous actions.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is the and I'm privileged because I've been, I think throughout my career has been always on Indigenous peoples. I spent only like 5 years I was away and still on Indigenous peoples issues. But again, as working with AMAN as organizations, hang on 1 minute. Okay, my dog, sorry. But working with AMAN, it's been always the cooperation and collective action, not just within Indigenous community, one Indigenous community, but there's always among Indigenous communities, and even we expand to non-Indigenous communities, which is farmers, local communities, and urban settings. The collective action that we do at least since in last 15 years has been we try to rehabilitate together the degraded land that has been already destroyed by companies, either that's a coal mining or a logging companies, mining companies, and especially the land that has been used for oil palm. We have some Indigenous communities who are they call what they do is bring back the soil to life, because apparently that's why we call the oil palm as the plant from hell, because once they grew up on the land, it's not just killing other animal and plants, but it is also killing the soil. So this is the long time work to rehabilitate and to revitalize the soil. We do a lot of like defense when we have some intruders coming to our community. But what is very important at this point is the rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the rituals. Since the COVID, we believe, and this is the message that we get from our elders, saying that this is not just about the virus. First, we should stop saying its name, because if we keep repeating saying its name, COVID-19, it will never go. But what actually means that we all together have to make sure again the action. How do we tackle the situations? And those are the thing that we have been doing in last 3 months at least, is rituals, and also and this is for Indigenous who still have the good forest, also how do you call it, making traditional medicines. And this is really the collective actions that is going on around Indigenous communities across Indonesia today, and including also the food distributions, the food collection and the food distribution, especially for those who don't have enough. And also we call it keep on planting. they plant new seeds, they plant, and that's the part of it's not just taking care of the human being, but also taking care of the spirits and taking care of the forest. So and taking care of others who don't have enough food. So that is the collective action that is going on now, including the one that I mentioned earlier. We collectively defend our indigenous territories and one of our sisters and brothers, and this is, I think, we need to raise concerns about them together globally, because they, even in the middle of this pandemic, they really have to face with the oil palm companies, and supported by paramilitary and also the government officers. I think that's, and they are on the ground at this time right now. So they are camping out in their boundaries, because they want to make sure that they protect the remaining forest that they have. And that's, I think, some of the few examples that I can provide at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruka. Those are great concrete examples. And Jessica, I know that no one goes to space alone, right? It's a whole team effort to get you all there, but yet you're part of an exclusive club with space travelers from different countries. I'm wondering how you approach science and solution-based science collectively outside of your own mission and your own group.
Yeah, you're right. That is something that's very important in what we do at NASA, is that we are often the images that people see and that do things like this and have the interviews, but it is the hundreds and thousands of people that support us and train us and get us there that are really responsible for everything. And you mentioned the international component, and that is something else that to me is one of the best things about the International Space Station, and that effort is, just by nature of the name, it is truly an international endeavor. It's not just NASA, it's also the Russian Space Agency, the Japanese, the Canadian, and the European space agencies all working together. And to me, that is a great example of what we can do, whether it's science, as you mentioned, or any collaborative project that we can take on together, even despite the varying political relationships that we have, even among those space station partners, as I think you're all aware, we are still able to live and to work up there together as a crew, as one crew, really in harmony. And we aren't thinking about our differences when we're up there. We're really only thinking about our similarities and what makes us one team, functioning really like a family up there. When you're 250 miles up above the planet, it's much easier for those things to seem to, for your priorities to align, I think, in the better way for us. Scientifically speaking, we on the International Space Station, our main goal is doing science. So we are up there all doing scientific experiments ranging from how microgravity and the spaceflight environment affect our human bodies, to combustion science, material science, really any type of science that we're doing, you name it. And that has been incredibly important for me throughout my life, in terms of the fact that I was a scientist before I became an astronaut. I was studying the physiology of animals that live in extreme environments before this job. So science and the scientific method have always been a part of my life. And I think when we talk about our responsibilities as scientists, as government organizations like NASA, that's really where I see one of the main roles of NASA in terms of this problem that we have in confronting climate change. And I see that as our responsibility to help provide that science and the data to help make the policy decisions that are crucial toward these protections that we're all talking about today. And that is something that NASA is very active in doing, whether it's from just straight Earth sensing, remote sensing type satellites that their sole function is to measure things like chlorophyll levels, sea states, global temperatures. We even have several instruments on the International Space Station these are the kinds of instruments that actually usually garner much less attention than the things that we're involved in as astronauts, since people like to have that human element. But there are several instruments on board the International Space Station, most of them mounted on the external, on the outside of the space station, that are looking at things like thermal infrared measurements, measuring severe thunderstorms and looking at the role in the atmosphere and climate change, upper atmospheric weather conditions like lightning, measuring solar irradiance, so trying to understand the total energy input into our planet. Of course, that has an obvious connotation to everything that's happening with climate change. There are nighttime observations of air glow from the atmosphere. We're measuring methane concentrations, of course, very important to our increases in temperature. And these are very, very accurate measurements, more accurate than we've been able to make before, and even measuring things like ozone and other gases and aerosols in the atmosphere. So that's the role that I really see NASA in helping confront these changes that we're all facing, is to help keep delivering that data set, a comprehensive data set that is, comprehensive over decades now, so that we can start seeing those long-term trends. And that's something that we even participate on a daily level as astronauts. One of the things that we do is take what we call crew Earth observations images. So for example, we have decades of imagery of the glaciers and ice fields in Patagonia, the northern and southern Patagonia ice fields. I took several of those pictures myself. And by looking at these photographs from the same vantage point over time, of course, we can help provide data at the retreat of those glaciers. So a lot of different avenues there where I think, the science and the data to me are what I hope that, given my experience and my background and my current position at NASA, can help deliver in order to help confront these global issues.
Thank you. Audrey, we just have a few minutes before we go to the Q&A section, and I see some really interesting questions coming in. I'd love to hear from you, almost, your thoughts on the same topic about, do you have a concrete example of different religious groups coming together to solve an environmental problem? We've heard with Ruka, about how different indigenous groups come together, or Jessica, how she's helping to create this, decades long body of evidence that'll solve some of these problems. But what about religions? How are they talking to each other in this space?
Well, the Parliament of the World's Religions, of which I'm the chair, specifically has, we are conveners of different communities of faith and even communities of no faith. So it is a huge platform for different, religious and non-religious traditions to come together and actually have dialogue and conversation. And part of what religious communities can do and have done and are doing is to have advocacy, to raise awareness about, the problems with climate change, and also to educate our communities about making sound personal choices. Like, for example, not to purchase things that are products from the destruction of the rainforests, and to be more conscious about how we are consuming things, and to actually participate for forest restoration or climate change activities, and to raise awareness. And we've had conversation this morning about the coronavirus. And so therefore, there is this very, this connection now being made about the animal to people pathogenic transfers that are coming about because of the destruction of the rainforests and our environment, and the incursion of human beings into these forests. So what are specific actions that have come together to help mobilize the different communities? There is really this fantastic Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, and the Secretariat is the United Nations Environment Program, and the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is a multi-faith coming together from the different faith traditions to specifically address, the protection of the rainforests. And I want to share, the resource guide, and please feel free to give my contact information to our listeners so I can help them access this resource guide on the rainforest protection for religious communities. And it has about 3 chapters that cover the understanding and causes and consequences of tropical deforestation, the spiritual and moral imperatives to protect rainforests and other peoples. And it provides specifically 10 religious perspectives from, for example, the Baha'is, the Buddhists, the Christian, the Confucian, and so forth. And it does set forth ways, very specific ways in which religious communities can get involved. So this resource guide has a moral and spiritual foundation undergirding the information, which can be applied, but also, it really gives us a specific additional information on this matter of the coronavirus as well. And the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative will be coming out very soon with this is called the Forests and Pandemics, How Protecting Tropical Forests Can Prevent Coronaviruses and Other Emerging Diseases. And it's an issue primer for religious leaders and faith communities. And it does establish the fact that these animal to human pathogenic transfers are increasing as we make incursions into the rainforest and come into contact with animals. So as we've seen in recent times, a lot of the viruses, Ebola, SARS, H1N1, etc., and this specific virus we're dealing with now does have animal origins. So it is imperative that we protect these rainforests, we change our consumption habits, and we grow in awareness about this health connection. And we must advocate as well as activate for the protection of our environment and these rainforests. So these are specific ways where the different religious traditions have come together to really address the aspect of climate change, as well as the destruction of the rainforests.
Thanks, Audrey. And I see that someone has already put a link to one of your resources in the chat. So thank you for whoever's done that. And please do follow along if that sounds interesting. And I think there are a couple questions that have come in that are just fascinating to me that I would love to hear each one of your perspective on. This one was specifically written for Ruka, but I think that each one of you has something to add. This comes from Adam Phillips, who says, could Ruka please talk a bit more about the image of space in her indigenous cosmology? She mentioned the boat, for example. And rather than taking it just as is, I do want to hear that. I want Ruka to answer that. But Jessica, you were in a boat, a ship we call it, but a boat, and that boat had to come back to Earth, right? So I see a connection there. And then Audrey, I'd love to hear from you how other faith-based societies and traditions view space and the cosmology. So Ruka, I don't know if you want to just give a little more explanation, and then Jessica, we'll turn to you.
This is very dangerous question because I can go on and on and on and on for 100 nights on this. Yeah, we believe up there, the sky, we call it Langi, is where the spirits, the divine spirits exist. We call Puang Matua do Tangana Langi, the old king in the middle of the sky. That's why we refer to the most divine spirits. And then it's very interesting because now the Christianity have captured that and used this as the name for the God. So that's how the Christianity has captured our belief system, yeah, and they use it, yeah. Then we also believe that up there is the life that is still going on, and also where some of the human beings were created there and sent to Earth together with some plants and animals. So some of the animals were created up there and some were here. So that's how. So that's the belief how we see the sky, yeah. And for example, cat is not created on earth. Rice is created here, but cat is sent. The cat ancestor were sent directly from the sky because the children, the rice having problems. That's probably why. That's probably why we call the cat is the mother of rice. So we are not supposed to do bad things to cat because that will bring us really really bad luck. We can have like hunger, a prolonged drought if we do bad things to cats. So that's that's how we still believe that we still have relation to that sky. So that's what we worship, all the spirits and also the creator up there. So that's how we see sky. I was actually asking Jessica the other day, did you see my origin of my place of origin? And I think Jessica can answer that now to the audience because I'm so curious as well, is that true or not?
Yeah.
Well, I wish I had the answer for Ruka about her descendants. Unfortunately, I don't. So perhaps I just wasn't in space long enough, or maybe not far enough out in space. But this conversation does remind me of a nice story that I was recounted from one of my NASA colleagues. And it was many years ago now, but it was the same spacecraft that I was in. So the Russian rocket and the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. And there was a crew of 3 crew members returning home, a truly diverse and international crew. There was a Russian cosmonaut, a female American astronaut, and then a female South Korean astronaut on that spacecraft coming back from their mission. And unfortunately, they had some problems with their reentry. So normally when we re-enter the atmosphere, there's a very accurate prediction of exactly where we're going to land. And the search and rescue teams can then arrive even before we do and be there to extract us from the capsule. And sometimes if some of that doesn't happen all exactly according to plan, you can land further away from the predicted site, and it might take the search and rescue teams a while to get to you. And that's what happened in this case. They landed very far distance away from where they were supposed to. So when they touched down, they first actually caused a fire. There are some what we call soft landing thrusters on the bottom of the spacecraft. And normally we land somewhere in kind of the middle of nowhere in Kazakhstan. Those landing thrusters fired and caused a small fire around in some of the grasses, and actually also burned up their parachute, which had brought them to the ground safely. So at first the NASA images showed no parachute, and people at NASA were worried that the parachute never deployed, which would have been catastrophic for the crew. But they did land safely, and there were some local nomadic peoples in Kazakhstan that were coming by, and they saw this spaceship there in the middle of their field. And so this man came and was at first quite angry and was speaking. So in Kazakhstan, many people speak both Kazakh and Russian. And so I'm not sure how much Russian this individual spoke, but was trying to communicate in Russian to the commander of the spacecraft. And they were trying to describe that they had just returned from space in their korabl, which is the Russian word for spacecraft, but it's also the same word for ship or boat, which again has that parallel to Ruka's story about her descendants coming from the skies in boats, the same word in Russian. So this man, this local, was really angry and went away, and then came back and said, well, take your ship and get away, get out of here. As if, he actually could now fly or get this ship moving away from the spot that they landed. And they finally were able to explain that they couldn't do anything. They had come from space. But I just love that story of all of these international people landing in the middle of nowhere, and this parallel of, the word korabl meaning ship and also spacecraft. So maybe, Ruka, there is some inherent natural connection between us, between your descendants, really, really between all of us here.
That's such a great story. I love it. I can only imagine that Kazakh farmer will be telling that story for the rest of his life, and his grandchildren will still wonder what the heck happened. Audrey, we just have a couple of minutes. I'm wondering if you have any more wisdom to add about how Indigenous people or not Indigenous people, how other religions view space and the cosmos. And I know that once again, I'm giving you a massive question, but anything specific you'd like to add?
You're asking for a miracle, which is within the purview of religion. So hopefully we'll have a miracle delivered here, how we can deal with this huge topic in 2 minutes. In any event, I'll begin with the perspective of my spiritual mother. And she said, look at the sky. There's no partition in the sky. So what she's bringing our consciousness to is the fact that this, the sky is ever open, and it is, and some scientists would say that's the dark matter, the what cannot be seen. And but she is basically talking about the unitive consciousness, the oneness. And from the different religious perspectives, the Shinto perspective would be that our connection is to what is hanging in the sky, in particular, the sun. So the first emperor in Japan came from the sun goddess Amaterasu. So there is this connection to the heavenly body. And the Buddhists will say shunyata, or the no thing, the unmanifest world, in which, so that is a deeper reality, because everything in the manifest world, in the external world, is impermanent. So it is again drawing the consciousness, the mind, to this underlying reality in which, that is in the unseen world, from which all things arise. But the essence is the no thing, the sunyata. So of course, these are just, 2 examples that I'm giving, and there are many examples. But basically, I think the fundamental is what I began with, this whole conversation with, and that is the underlying one consciousness in which there is no separation, there is no 2 or 3, there is only the oneness, the one. So my spiritual mother said there is only one power in that universe. No 2 powers, no 3 powers, and that power is God. So in the totality of the divine, everything that is created exists, and yet comes from that transcendental state in which no form or structure appear.
Wow. Thank you. And I just want to do one fast lightning round. I know we're 1 minute over time, but I think we can do this really fast. We can go in any order you ladies would like. But I'm just wondering, in let's say 6, we'll do 5 words or less. So you get 5 words. This is a challenge. What's the message you want to put out to this audience, to the world, and these topics we've been thinking about? I'll go first while you think, because I've had a little time to sit with this. I guess mine would be listen with an open heart. That's what I would want. And I feel like I'm gaining from this conversation, is to listen. So anyone else want to take me up on my challenge? Jessica's off mute. I'll let her go.
I'll take you up, and I guess I already said it, so maybe that's cheating, but we are in this together.
Perfect. Audrey, what are your 5 words?
Love, gratitude, kindness, compassion, and caring.
Beautiful. Ruka?
Yeah, Jessica took mine already, but I will say that united, we can do this together.
So encouraging. And to all of these very wise women, thank you for spending an hour with me and for sharing your perspective and your wisdom and your hearts. So with that, I will say thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, and I'll hand it back to Yeb.
Thank you, Caitlin, for facilitating the discussion.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so
Thank you, Caitlin.
And thanks everyone for tuning in as well.
And thank you, Caitlin, and all of our wonderful panelists, Ruka, Jessica, and Audrey. But before I proceed, can I request my video to be activated? There you go. And we're back here in the Philippines at midnight. And thank you once again for that, I would say, very powerful conversation. And I hope that all of you out there who are listening in have gained a lot of insight on what could truly bring us together. One of the amazing things that inspires me around that panel is that it's an all-women panel. So wonderful to have that. That doesn't always happen. It's mostly panels with a lot of men, and I salute all of you there for that amazing conversation. It has inspired us a lot, and with all of those parting words, with those 5 words, I think that captures so beautifully what we're all aiming for in that particular session. So thank you again, Caitlin. And we're back here with AG, continuing with his painting, and it reminds me of I think what George Harrison once said, that one of the most beautiful songs that I know, and this is George Harrison, are those that I haven't written yet. And he says that because of his belief in the importance of the big picture. And as part of my reflection from that conversation we just had with Caitlin, Ruka, Jessica, and Audrey, is the importance of the big picture and how unity, oneness, and I guess that's the sort of overarching theme that we had there, was how we are one, how we all live on one home. And speaking of things that have not been written yet, while the panel was having that conversation, AG was continuing with his mural, and we're here with AG. I hope you can see this masterpiece unfolding. This was yet unwritten, quote unquote, when we started the panel, and now it's taking shape with all of these features of face of an indigenous leader. I think that's the moon out there. And maybe let's ask AG a little bit on what he's coming up with there. AG.
Hello everyone. Good morning to the Philippines, and good afternoon to the rest of the world. Yes, so behind me is a mural that's unfolding right now. I started painting a few minutes ago with an indigenous woman looking up to the heavens. And as I was listening to the conversation, I was getting affirmations as to what I was thinking of doing at the beginning, and how we tend to connect to the heavens, even if we're grounded, even if we're so if our realities belong here on the ground, we always look at the heavens, and we're always amazed by the heavenly bodies. And I was also amazed at how the women talked about different realities, but then you find unity in each one of them. I mean, in all of them. I think that's how we should attack or tackle the bigger picture, the bigger challenges that humanity is facing. This is the time that we need to work as one and not as different individuals or different citizens. We are citizens of the earth. When we look at humanity, you should look at it as one, and not as a collective of thousands of cultures. Because in the end, our common home should be protected by each one of us.
So thanks for that, AG. And AG will continue with his artwork, and we'll get back to that later. I was truly inspired by the first panel, and I'm sure all of you had your own takeaways from that. And for me, one of the things I love about that is how Jessica, for example, reminded us of how we must celebrate our differences and also think about how similar we are in many ways. And that exhortation from Audrey, of course, for us to see that one consciousness as transcending all of us. That's truly powerful to hear. I also think I'm also reminded somehow of the words one of my favorite science novelists, Isaac Asimov, once said that one of the tragic things in our time is how science gathers knowledge faster than society gains wisdom. And I mentioned that because of the challenges and thanks, Caitlin, for bringing that into the conversation earlier around how all of this comes together into a discussion on the environmental challenges, and not just environmental, but all of the root causes that affect our environmental issues. That's truly an important reminder for all of us, for science to work for us and for us to be guided with what the best kind of knowledge we have been gifted with. Now, talking about that, I have the privilege and pleasure to introduce to you our next panel, and we will be hearing from friends around the issue of indigenous peoples' demands, and that reminds me, of course, of one thing that, if not us, then who has always been very vocal about, that if the world is really serious about confronting our biggest challenges and serious about averting the climate crisis, we need to support a solution that already exists. And they are referring to indigenous peoples being the best guardians of the forest, where their rights for over their territories are truly important in ensuring that we protect biodiversity and therefore win that journey and have some meaningful outcome in terms of averting the climate crisis. So in the next panel, we will hear from our friends who will be talking about how science actually serves the interests of indigenous peoples' demands, which include the importance of recognizing their rights to land, territories, as well as resources, the importance of prior informed consent, the importance of achieving peace and averting violence in the way that indigenous communities are being confronted with, and how we value ancestral knowledge. These are some of the important demands from our indigenous communities, and we will be talking about how geospatial data, in fact, are able to serve that. And so I'm happy to turn over the discussion to our friend Nina Kancheva Tushev, who will be hosting this next panel. Over to you, Nina.
I believe this will be my colleague Annie Verning for this panel, and I'm on the next panel. So Annie, I'll let you take it over from here.
Awesome.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. Over to you, Annie.
Great. Thank you so much, Nina and Yev, and also to our first round of panelists. What an amazing way to start the day. So for all of us on this second panel, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this amazing week of sessions for our village. And as Yev introduced, in this second session, we'll be talking about how spatial data, a lot of it generated from satellites and sensors in the sky, can be used to support Indigenous peoples. My name is Annie Vernick, and I work for the United Nations Development Program in New York as a coordinator for several of our projects that use spatial data and maps to support action for the planet and for human well-being. I'll be facilitating today's session, and I am joined by two panelists, Dr. Cynthia Smith and Mr. James Leslie. So Cynthia is an associate program manager for NASA's Applied Science Ecological Forecasting Program, and she's also the lead for NASA's Indigenous Peoples Pilot Program. James is technical advisor on ecosystems and climate change in the UNDP Peru Country Office. So welcome, Cindy and James. We're so glad to have you here with us today. To bring us back to the overall goals of our village, today we're really focused on what brings us all together. And our panel set us up beautifully to start talking about this. We're looking for commonalities and vision that can support solutions for Indigenous peoples and local communities that are really at the core of the Our Village platform and space. So in our session today, UNDP and NASA will share about our work using spatial data, talk a little bit about projects that are actively supporting Indigenous communities, Indigenous and local communities, and also look to all of you for input about how we can better support work at the grassroots. So in our last session, we heard a conversation, and we'll switch gears a little bit for this session to offer you a series of engaging lightning presentations. So first, we'll hear from Cindy about NASA's work with Indigenous peoples. I'll then give a speedy presentation on our work around our UN Biodiversity Lab platform and to map what we're calling essential life support areas. And last but not least, we'll hear from James about how UNDP Peru is working with Indigenous communities to use spatial data for COVID response and recovery. Each of these presentations will be engaging, and we're hoping to get your thoughts and opinions. We'll have time for 1 or 2 questions after each before moving on to the next. As we were doing during the last session, we encourage you to add your questions to the question box throughout the presentations, and we'll pick out a couple that we can answer live. The rest, we're happy to follow up with you over email about. So with that, let's get started. Cindy, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Annie. And Leah, if you could bring up my presentation, that would be great. There we go. So my name is Cindy Schmidt, as Annie said, and I'm a research scientist with NASA's Earth Science Program. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the work I've been doing with Indigenous peoples. Next slide, please. So NASA's, as Jessica pointed out, NASA's Earth Science Program has a fleet of Earth observing satellites. We have a lot of them up there right now, including several that are on the space station. And they help us study the land, oceans, and atmosphere from a very unique perspective. Next slide, please. So NASA's Applied Sciences Program uses data from those satellites to help support decision-making for these areas: disasters, wildfires, health and air quality, and so forth. And most importantly, we help build the capacity of people to use these resources. So for the last 3 years, I've been working with tribal nations in the United States to help build their capacity to use satellite Earth observations for both natural and cultural resource management. Next slide, please. And we've been doing that primarily through in-person technical workshops. We co-develop the workshops with the tribal nations so we can focus on issues that are important to them. It's also important that we conduct the workshops on tribal lands so we can develop relationships with the peoples of those lands and better understand the connection between the tribal nations and their environment. Next slide, please. We also have a specific project that we're working on with the Navajo Nation for reporting drought. Next slide, please. My colleague Amber McCollum is helping the Navajo Nation create a web-based drought reporting tool using Navajo rain gauge data and satellite data, and designing it so they can create drought reports that they can use to get financial assistance during times of extreme drought, which in recent years has been relatively often. Next slide, please. And lastly, I wanted to tell you all about a new global effort to create an Indigenous people's community of practice. So GEO is a global partnership of government and organizations that pledge to use satellite Earth observations for informing decisions. The first ever Indigenous-led session was held at GEO's Ministerial Summit last November in Australia. It brought together Indigenous leaders from around the world to emphasize the importance of including the Indigenous voice within GEO. And if you're interested, we invite you all to participate in that community of practice. Next slide, please. So I'm going to end this quick presentation with this message, this wonderful message from the Lakota people in the US. And if I had to choose 4 words that really summarized what I'm hearing today, is that we are all related. So thank you very much, Annie. I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. So just a reminder to all of our participants, you can drop questions for Cindy into the chat. We have time for 1 or 2. While we're waiting for those to come in, Cindy, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what learnings you're taking from the work that NASA is conducting in the US that you think would be applicable for supporting Indigenous communities to use spatial data around the world.
Yeah, there's several things, but briefly, one of the things that really comes to mind that was sort of a new thing for me was the idea of data sovereignty. And that message, that term kept coming up with a lot of the trainings that we're doing. And now as we're working more globally and internationally, that term continues to come up. And that's really about the idea that there are certain data out there that Indigenous communities would like not to be made public. So I work in a world where we make data publicly available. So it's available to anybody who wants to use it. It's freely available. And so this idea of data sovereignty is very important to Indigenous communities, because there are certain areas of their ancestral lands that they don't want to be made public, such as sacred sites or ceremonial sites and things like that. And so that's something I think those of us that work with Indigenous communities, both inside the US and outside the US.
Great, thank you so much, Cindy. And just a reminder to myself and to all of our panelists to talk a little bit slower so the interpreters can properly interpret to Spanish and Portuguese. So with that, I will wrap up to move on to our next presentation. Cindy is available to answer any further questions over email, and my colleague Leah is dropping her email into the chat. We'd love to discuss more and share the results of the work that she's done with this whole community. So I am going to move into our second presentation of this session. Let me just pull it up here. All right. So for the second presentation, I am going to give all of you a flash introduction to our UN Biodiversity Lab platform. So, simple question, what is it? UNDP, with our partners, created UN Biodiversity Lab about 2 years ago. It's a free, open source platform that provides a diverse range of stakeholders with access to high quality global spatial data and analytic tools. And the best part is that it doesn't require any GIS experience to be able to use or visualize data on the platform, democratizing access to all of the amazing global spatial data that we have available. So just to give you a quick overview of the site, I'm going to run through 5 key features. So first, you can access 116 of the world's best global spatial data layers. So these are maps of things like biodiversity, protected areas, or ecosystem services like water provision, carbon sequestration, or disaster risk reduction. Second, the platform provides priority access to data that's being generated by 2 NASA-supported projects that are working to identify the best of the last tropical forests. Third, and this really gets to the center of our work with UN Biodiversity Lab, we provide user groups with access to private projects where they can upload their own data into a secure workspace and visualize it in combination with any of the global data sets we offer. Over the past 2 years, we've provided these spaces primarily to government users, but we're beginning conversations with a few different Indigenous groups, and we're really interested to see how this might be able to support Indigenous peoples and local communities who are already using spatial data in their work to safeguard their lands. Fourth, as I mentioned, you can conduct basic analyses and create maps. And fifth, you can also use the platform to create what we call story maps, which are photo essays with live maps and text that you can use to communicate about your conservation action and successes. So on this slide, I just want to highlight one tool that might be of interest to some of you. This is our Click to Create Polygon tool. So it's a little slow to start, but you should now see the user going in to create a shape on the screen. So you could use this to identify, for example, the lands that your community stewards or a project area that you're working on. You can then visualize this with any of the global data layers we have on the platform. So what we're seeing here is the area of interest and above ground biomass. Over the past 2 years, as I mentioned, we've primarily focused on building relationships with policymakers and governments, but UN Biodiversity Lab is entirely open to any users. And as we move forward, we're really interested to explore how we can use this tool to support Indigenous peoples and local communities and all the amazing work that's going on at the grassroots. So I'm going to use one of the cool features that Zoom offers to get a sense of all of your thoughts. So if I could ask the Our Village team to pull up our poll and launch it. If this is working correctly, all of you who are participating should see a box pop up on your screen. There we go. And you should be able to answer the question, what features of UN Biodiversity Lab are most relevant for your work? So I'll give you about 30 seconds or so to fill this in. We have several different options and you can select multiple. So access global data layers, create story maps, upload my data to a secure private project, run basic analyses, create maps, and create story maps. So as we're waiting for responses to come in, I just want to highlight that today I gave a very quick overview of our work with UN Biodiversity Lab, but if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to take our technical training and my colleague Leah is dropping the link into the chat right now. So if I could ask the Our Village host to stop the poll now and see what responses we got back. I'm not seeing the responses pop up, but maybe they will shortly. In the meantime, I will just quickly wrap up my presentation and maybe we can get back to those at the very end. Oh, here we go. So it looks like access to global data layers trumped the poll with interest in several of the other features as well. All right, so just to wrap up, looking forward to the next year, we're working with 5 pilot countries to help identify what we call essential life support areas. So, oops, there we go. So we define these as areas that are essential to biodiversity and also to human well-being, because they provide a wide range of ecosystem services that you can see listed on this slide. So we're working with some of the world's best scientists to use what's called systematic conservation planning to help governments identify where they can take nature-based actions to safeguard these areas. So here's a sneak peek of our first ELSA map for Costa Rica, which shows where the country should take action to protect, restore, manage, and green urban areas based on their unique national priorities. We'll be rolling this work out throughout the year, and my colleague James will also talk a little bit more about this project in Peru in the next presentation. So with that, I will wrap up, and let me see if I have time to take one question. Let's see. It looks like we actually have one question for Cindy that I'd like to loop back to before we move on to James's presentation. So Cindy, Marion Marigo from UNDP asks, she says, the Navajo tribe is severely impacted by COVID currently. And we know that spatial data can be a powerful tool for green recovery and support for the restoration and conservation of biodiversity. Will NASA be able to support the Navajo Nation with recovery from COVID? Is there anything that's coming up for you around that issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's been a lot of discussion about how Earth observations can be used for looking at COVID issues, particularly in hard-hit areas like the Navajo Nation. The challenge with monitoring COVID is that there's very weak sort of, in some ways, environmental link, at least what you can see from space. So there's been a lot of work done on the effects on the decrease of, say, air pollution because people aren't moving around so much, but not so much on sort of the direct impacts on COVID on people. On the Navajo Nation, there's a real link between lack of water and COVID. And that's where we're helping to play a role by sort of monitoring those water resources within the nation. So they're kind of pivoting a little bit from focusing on drought and looking at the relationship between that, the water resources or the lack of water resources available on the nation and COVID at the moment. So that's some ongoing work that's being done. Thank you for that question.
Great, thank you, Cindy. And to talk, this is a great segue to pivot to James, who will talk more about how UNDP Peru is using spatial data specifically around COVID response and recovery in the country. So James, over to you.
Thank you very much, Annie. I hope you hear me well. I'm sharing my screen as I speak here. So I hope you can all see my screen, and thank you very much again for this invitation. And I'm here to talk about our work here in Peru. In Peru, UNDP and our partners are using spatial data and analysis of both nature and communities, integrated with community-based monitoring to inform response and recovery strategies to COVID, specifically for indigenous communities who depend on the healthy ecosystems for their livelihoods and for their economies. And so our initial entry point is the Amazon region in Peru, where we've used national census data to analyze pre-existing COVID-related vulnerabilities at the regional or departmental level, looking at vulnerabilities associated with income, food security, labor, access to finance, as well as access to drinking water. And we've also looked at where the presence of COVID currently is countrywide. And while this is an important initial step, and while it can guide high-level policy and planning decisions, much of the response and recovery efforts, as we know, are led by local governments, and they need to be tailored to specific social, cultural, and environmental contexts in the landscape. And so we used this initial high-level analysis to inform our own priority setting of where to focus our limited resources to support response and recovery strategies on the ground. And when we move to the departmental level, and here we're looking specifically at the Department of Loreto, we look to fine-tune the analysis further. And we used for that purpose both the Human Development Index at the district level, which is based on income, education, and life expectancy. And we also looked at the index of the density of the state. And with these two indices, we were able to gauge further the existing vulnerability, underlying vulnerabilities and capacities at the provincial level. But still, the data was not detailed enough to make day-to-day decisions regarding the response to COVID and in a context of emergency. So we worked to develop a vulnerability analysis specific to COVID, mapping threats, for example, the proximity of the indigenous communities to urban areas where there are a greater number of existing cases. Also looking at sensitivity, for example, the density and the age distribution of the indigenous population in the landscape. And also mapping response capacity, looking at the proximity of the communities to health services that could be reached in the case of an emergency. But in undertaking this analysis, we also confronted several challenges related to the quality of the data, the completeness of the data sets, the dispersed information among multiple public agencies, as well as what we've perceived as a limited connection of existing information with response measures that are being taken. So we reached out to community organizations and public agencies in priority landscapes in order to try to fill those gaps and address those challenges. And in doing so, we've supported the implementation of a multi-stakeholder coordination platform to address COVID in the landscape, led by the local government, but also with the participation of the Health Ministry, the Social Development Ministry, the Ministry of Environment, indigenous organizations, among others. And through this multi-stakeholder approach, we're working to improve the information flow and the communications between the communities, the public agencies responsible for the COVID response, as well as with other development partners. And this platform approach, we consider it's not only useful to address emergencies such as COVID, but also for the recovery phase. And if we come back to the Loreto region, there are more than 600 indigenous communities in Loreto, many of them with a strong connection to nature for their well-being. As a next step, and related to what Annie mentioned, we will map and analyze, together with government and civil society and community partners, the ecosystem services and the nature-based solutions that are available in these territories, with the expectation that we can accelerate recovery strategies with the communities at the center. But at the same time, that's not enough. We also have to look at who are the partners on the ground who can support these recovery strategies. There's the National Park Service. There's the Ministry of Social Development. There are also the fisheries departments, ports to access and access markets. There are local governments. And so understanding both the institutional landscape and social landscape, as well as the biological landscape and the ecosystem services, will help the communities to have ecosystem-based recovery strategies at the landscape level. And just to wrap up, therefore, we see there to be a great opportunity to use these tools that allow us to map nature for both people and planet, as well as the multi-stakeholder partnership approach to enhance the resilience of these ecosystems as well as the communities, not only for the current, but also for the future risks. Thank you, Annie.
Great, thank you so much, James. So I see a few interesting questions coming through in the chat, but unfortunately we are at time for our session. So I'm gonna ask if anyone has questions for James, please reach out to him over email. Leah is again dropping his email address into the chat. And with this, I just wanna do a final wrap up for our session and give a really warm thanks to Cindy and James for joining us today, as well as to the whole Our Village team and all the other panelists today. We're so inspired to be a part of this group and hope that we can work together to create partnerships to take action for communities around the world and for the planet. So with that, I just want to say thank you, gracias a todos, and hand it back to Yeb.
Thank you very much, Annie, Cindy, and James. Now we're back from that panel discussion. We will be taking sort of a little break. Again, all of you are joining us at Our Village. This is brought to us by If Not Us, Then Who, in partnership with the Hip Hop Caucus and the Guardians of the Forest. We will take this little break from the panel discussions. And for the meantime, we come back here to A.G. Sanyo and his unfolding mural. Sit back, maybe grab a drink, and for the next couple of minutes, you can just watch A.G. do his magic. And we'll be back in 2 minutes for the next panel discussion. Okay, thanks everyone. I hope you found that very useful. We now go to the next segment of our program, and we're gonna hear stories around resilience from Costa Rica and Indonesia. And for this, I will hand you over to the host of that panel, Paula Alvarado from the 10-year facility. Over to you, Paula.
Thank you, Jeb. And thank you to everybody who is actually with us this afternoon. I am in Sweden, so it's late afternoon for us here. So hello to everybody around the world. It's really an honor and a privilege to be part of these discussions and to hear so many inspiring stories from different professions, different points of view, different perspectives, just reminding us that we are all one and we are all in this together, and there is so much we can learn from our indigenous ancestors. My name is Paula Alvarado, and I am working with the 10-year facility, an international organization working with indigenous communities in the process of securing their land rights. Today, we're here to listen to some stories, as Jeb said, from Costa Rica and Indonesia, about resilience, about communities, about how it's possible to build on communities' resilience once the territories are secure, and how it's possible to protect their lands and share the knowledge once we can build on secure land rights. The stories of territories go back to, hundreds of years, but something that we know already is how talented, how brilliant are indigenous communities in securing our forests, and therefore helping us all live a better future. It is of utter importance to continue to do that. And today I'm honored to be with three women, two from Costa Rica, Marisela Fernandez and Iris Leck from Costa Rica. Marisela and Iris are both Cabecari indigenous leaders. Marisela has been an activist of indigenous women's rights for more than 50 years. And Iris is a young indigenous leader who has been leading a very interesting project that is helping provide food security in the middle of COVID-19. And she will tell us more about it. I'm also here today with Mina Cetra. Mina Cetra is an indigenous woman leader from the Dayak Bongkam area of West Kalimantan in Indonesia. She's a Deputy Secretary General of AMAN, and she's been an activist for more than 20 years, working on indigenous issues locally, nationally, and internationally. So I would like to welcome today, please, Marisela, Iris, and Mina to this afternoon presentation. And I would like to start today's gathering listening to Iris and asking her to share some more stories about the current initiative in Costa Rica, led by RIPCA, to provide food exchange and food security to the different communities. Iris, welcome to this afternoon panel. And I hope Iris is with us. Yes, there she is. Iris?
Sí.
Okay.
Sí.
There we are. Okay, so we have Iris and Marisela on screen. And I will ask both of you to please speak slowly because your presentation will be translated to English. Okay, so can you hear me well, both Iris and Marisela?
Sí, sí, Juan, sí, sí.
Perfecto. Voy a hablar un ratito en español a los traductores para que no se asusten. Les pido que hablen despacio durante la presentación para que su presentación pueda ser traducida al inglés. Entonces vamos a empezar con Iris y después vamos a preguntarle a Marisela algunas preguntas también. Ok, voy a volver al inglés. a los traductores. So, Iris, could you tell us a bit more about the RIPCA initiative in Costa Rica, the one that we discussed previously that offers the possibility of exchange food to the different communities?
Okay. No lo escucho muy bien.
Ok, voy a hacer la pregunta en español a los traductores. Iris, te pido por favor que nos cuentes un poco sobre la iniciativa de RIPCA del mercado virtual de intercambio de alimentos.
Ok, la iniciativa lo estamos realizando. Ahora actualmente estamos trabajando en el intercambio de alimentos. Estamos trabajando con las familias de las mismas zonas indígenas para lo de la soberanía y la seguridad alimentaria de las familias. Entonces, muchas familias tienen sus productos y hay familias que no las tienen. Entonces, estamos trabajando en el intercambio de la producción, que es lo más importante, porque esto de la pandemia no podemos permitir que las familias sufran de hambre. Entonces, con esta gran iniciativa que estamos trabajando, es solventar la soberanía alimentaria y somos mujeres que estamos trabajando para apoyar a más familias de nuestro territorio para el intercambio.
Could you explain us a little bit more how is this exchange taking place? ¿Nos puedes explicar un poco más cómo se da este intercambio?
El intercambio ahorita lo estamos trabajando vía virtual. Por esto de la pandemia no nos permite la aglomeración, entonces estamos trabajando vía virtual. Trabajamos en una base de datos. Igualmente trabajamos con unas chicas que son mujeres de la comunidad, que son tejedoras de conocimiento. Ellas son las encargadas de recoger la información de las familias, de qué productos tiene cada familia y qué productos necesitan también las familias. Entonces, ellas nos hacen llegar esas informaciones a nosotras en la oficina. Ya con esa información, con los nombres de las familias y los productos que necesitan, y los productos que pueden ofrecer, entonces trabajamos con esa base de datos, hacemos el intercambio. Entonces, lo hacemos vía virtual para así no hacerla presencial por todo esto del COVID que no nos permite trabajar en hacer la feria presencial. Entonces, el intercambio consiste en la solidaridad de intercambiar en la colectividad familiar, que las familias también trabajen en el intercambio, no solamente en que la familia tenga sus productos y no pueda intercambiarlo. Entonces, lo que fomentamos con nuestra cultura indígena, así nuestros mayores lo han trabajado anteriormente en lo que es el intercambio. Entonces, con esto de la pandemia seguimos aumentando más el trabajo de solidaridad. Entonces, en eso trabajamos lo que es la producción cultural. Entonces, estamos haciendo, en esta semana ya estamos con el primer intercambio. De hecho, ya ayer trabajamos en este proyecto y más adelante vamos a seguir trabajando aún más. Y también, ¿por qué no trabajarlo ya crear un mercado para así transportar los productos de las familias, ya también fomentar también el intercambio, lo que entre las familias siempre se va a mantener, pero también que las familias puedan vender sus productos en página web, WhatsApp, que también lo estamos trabajando también.
In the case of the products, if a family wants to sell a product, how do they do that? Do they have to wait for somebody to come and ask them, or can they use WhatsApp or another platform to upload the information? En el caso de que a los traductores estoy hablando en español y en inglés porque nuestras panelistas no tienen acceso a traducción simultánea. Iris, les preguntaba de que en el caso de que si una familia quiere vender sus productos, ¿cómo hace para subirlos a esta red virtual? ¿Qué plataforma necesitan? Porque entendemos que en muchas de las comunidades es limitado el acceso a Internet. Entonces, ¿cómo están resolviendo ese problema?
Actualmente, como le decía anteriormente, estamos trabajando con las chicas que son tejedoras de conocimiento. Ellas son de las comunidades, viven en la comunidad, entonces tenemos una por cada comunidad. Entonces ella va en donde cada familia a recoger la información y nosotros ya sea nos vamos donde ellas, donde está la chica, donde vio la tejedora, o ella viene a la oficina donde estamos trabajando, porque donde trabajamos en la oficina sí tenemos acceso a Internet. Entonces, ya con esa información que las chicas tienen en sus comunidades, ya con eso trabajamos para saber qué productos necesita y tiene la familia.
So the knowledge weavers collect the information door by door. So las tejedoras de conocimiento colectan la información puerta a puerta, ¿verdad?
Sí, exacto. Con esa información ya podemos trabajarlo, entonces ya con esa información lo subimos a la base de datos en que vamos a trabajar, ya sabemos qué producto, entonces ya más adelante, como le decía, en el mercado que vamos a trabajar, entonces ya en diferentes lugares ya la familia pueden tener acceso a esa plataforma, entonces lo que lo manejamos somos nosotras en la oficina. Es porque, como decía anteriormente, en algunos lugares no hay mucho acceso a Internet, las familias no tienen acceso a Internet, entonces lo estamos facilitando esas posibilidades para que las familias puedan sacar sus productos.
Thank you, perfecto, gracias. Marisela, ahora contigo. Me gustaría que nos contaras un poco más el rol de las mujeres en este servicio de fortalecer la resiliencia de las comunidades indígenas en esta época de COVID. I'm asking Maricel to share with us a bit more the role of women in these COVID times. As I understand, they are key members of their community to sharing knowledge and resilience strategies. Quisiera que nos contaras un poco más sobre las estrategias de resiliencia y la transmisión de conocimiento que las mujeres de tu comunidad están haciendo.
Bueno, buenos días, mi nombre es Marisela Fernández, indígena de Costa Rica. Vivo en territorios indígenas, la cual es hermosa, mucha montaña, mucho bosque, muchos recursos naturales. Y verdad, le voy a contar un poquito sobre el rol de la mujer indígena en el tema del conocimiento cultural y producción. Nosotros como mujeres indígenas hemos venido trabajando, somos las mujeres, como les decía ayer, las transmisoras del conocimiento cultural productivo en nuestras comunidades. Y hemos venido trabajando organizadamente, estamos trabajando sobre el tema de producción cultural, cómo poder fortalecer ese conocimiento que nuestros ancestros han transmitido y han trabajado y han producido, y cómo poder fortalecerlo más con una organización de nuestra comunidad de mujeres que venga a fortalecer esa espiritualidad, esa conexión con la naturaleza y más que todo con la madre tierra, porque el tema de producción es algo que nosotros ancestralmente, nuestros mayores nos han enseñado cómo producir la tierra, de qué forma se trabaja. No es así que vayamos y deforestemos y hagámosle daño a la tierra, no, sino que hay una forma de trabajar la tierra. Entonces es un trabajo cultural, porque las mujeres así lo hemos visto y entonces estamos organizadas para trabajar, pero en eso llega la pandemia a nuestro país. Y entonces esa pandemia, bueno, claro que nos asusta, nos preocupa, nos hace sentir como qué va a pasar con nuestra familia, qué va a pasar con nuestros hijos, qué va a pasar con nuestra futura generación, porque esto es algo que va a afectar, está afectando directamente a nuestro país, cosa que escuchábamos que estaba en otro continente. Pero cuando llega a Costa Rica, eso nos preocupa tanto a nosotros como mujeres, porque somos las que estamos en el hogar con nuestra familia, con nuestros hijos, con nuestros nietos y con todo, digamos, con toda la familia. Entonces, bueno, seguimos trabajando, luchando de veramente. A nadie es un secreto que esto asusta, esto preocupa, no es algo que estamos acostumbrados, pero ante esta pandemia pues también nos abre la oportunidad de fortalecer más ese conocimiento cultural, tradicional, ancestral sobre el tema de producción indígena. Entonces nos enfocamos más sobre ese tema, cómo vamos a trabajar ahora que no podemos aglomerar gente. ¿Cómo vamos a trabajar el tema cultural con los jóvenes? ¿Cómo vamos a transmitir ese conocimiento a los niños? Entonces, de ahí nace, bueno, todo este trabajo nos viene a fortalecer más. Ahí es donde nace también lo que la compañera acaba de mencionar, las tejedoras del conocimiento, que va de casa en casa y se reúne con una familia. Igual nosotros que estamos acá, pues trabajamos mancomunadamente con la comunidad y con la tejedora para que ella transmita ese conocimiento, no aglomerar gente, sino este trabajo que estamos llevando, cómo fortalecer la cultura en lo que es tradición cultural. La solidaridad es algo que no podemos olvidar. El intercambio de productos, de semilla, de lo que le hace falta a otra familia, pues también si yo tengo, ¿cómo le voy a dar esa familia también tenga esa semilla, esa familia también produzca esa semilla, esa familia también se enfoque a sembrar desde la perspectiva indígena, con nuestros principios y valores culturales, porque eso es que hace que nuestros territorios indígenas se vea siempre como un pueblo fuerte, un pueblo orgulloso de tener su identidad cultural fortalecido, digamos, en esos espacios. Entonces, nosotros, la verdad, como mujeres, pues, nos hemos venido trabajando, hemos venido fortaleciendo nuestro liderazgo, porque también para cualquiera, yo creo que donde quiera que hay pueblos indígenas, el apoyo a los pueblos indígenas no es un 100%, todos lo conocemos. Ante esta crisis, los gobiernos centrales están ahorita mismo enfrentando esta crisis a nivel nacional. Y entonces, ¿qué vamos a esperar nosotros como mujeres y como pueblos indígenas? Entonces, ahí es donde estamos esperando. Por ejemplo, nosotros estamos trabajando con las 5 categorías, el Teito, que tal vez la compañía, digamos, le pueda pasar eso, el Huito, el Chimogro, el Sánchez, el Sadri, que es algo que, bueno, que yo creo que lo pasamos.
Tal vez nos puedas explicar un poquito más lo que son esas 5 categorías a las que te refieres.
Que me muestre, no, para mostrarle la imagen, tal vez me puedan mostrar, Anita. Anita la que tiene la imagen. Ana tiene la imagen, que me pueda mostrar la imagen de las 5 categorías. Bueno, está manejando ella.
Disculpe, vamos a encontrar.
Vamos a ver las imágenes de las 5 categorías a las que Marisela se está refiriendo en cuanto a la producción indígena, la visión indígena de la producción y el cuidado de tierra. Y las palabras están en el idioma local, así que es difícil para los traductores traducirlas al español o al inglés. Ella tiene un diagrama que quiere compartir con nosotros, así que les pedimos a la audiencia un poquito de paciencia. ¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí,
en 3 minutos, por favor.
Ok.
3 minutos.
En esa parte que en cualquier momentito suben la imagen, pero Marisela, tal vez tú puedas continuar explicándonos un poco lo que son las categorías.
Bueno.
Mientras que suben la imagen.
Pues, voy a empezar con el Huito, que es la parcela que está cerca de la casa, donde nosotros trabajamos lo que es la parte, digamos, la producción inmediata, yo lo puedo mencionar así, donde ocupo las plantas medicinales, ocupo, por ejemplo, chiles, tomates, cosas que yo
Marisela,
ocupo.
perdón, habla un poquito más lento para que los traductores puedan traducir al inglés. Un poquito más lenta, por favor.
Sí, está bien.
Entonces, hablamos de la parcela más cercana a la casa, ¿verdad? ¿Seguimos?
La parcela más cercana de la casa, donde producimos plantas medicinales, productos así de inmediato que ocupamos para la casa. El otro, Sacha, que es el bosque, donde es de todo, por eso dice Sacha, es de nosotros, de todos, que es de todos nosotros los que vivimos en el territorio. El otro está el Sadri, que es donde también tenemos productos de cerdo, gallina. Bueno, ahí está.
Estamos viendo el sí, diagrama.
Sí, el Sadri, que ahí donde ven los cerdos, las gallinas, y el Chomogro, donde está el cacao, árboles frutales, árboles maderables, todo lo que es productos de cacao, de tubérculos, todo eso está ahí en ese sitio ahí. El teito es, nosotros le decimos un tacotal, donde es un lugar, terreno donde rotamos, que hoy trabajamos aquí, sembramos arroz, frijoles o maíz, pero otro día dejamos ese terreno que repose, que descanse y trabajamos otra parte donde vamos a trabajar el otro terreno. No es que siempre trabajamos un terreno, sino que siempre estamos rotando el terreno. No podemos maltratar la madre tierra, de que todo el tiempo que estemos trabajando en ese lugar. Entonces eso se llama teitú. Y el huito, porque ya lo expliqué, el chimogru, el sadri, esta es la forma de las 5 categorías de lo que trabajamos los indígenas. Es así para proteger y cuidar todo lo que es la parte de la producción indígena.
Fantástico. Muchísimas gracias a Marisela y a Iris por compartir esta experiencia de los proyectos en Costa Rica y de cómo la comunidad está... Sí, sigue Marisela, perdón.
Sí, no, tal vez para decirle a todos los que me escuchan, sé que aquí tal vez no hay la forma de estar en esto, pero bueno, hoy lo estoy haciendo y muchas gracias por el espacio y decirle que de veramente esto es un apoyo, es algo, una experiencia, un intercambio de conocimiento y así como voy a aprender de ustedes, ustedes también pueden aprender de mí. Y cualquier apoyo de cualquier instancia a nuestra organización, a nuestro grupo, a nuestro territorio, será bienvenido para nosotras. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Marisela. Muchísimas gracias, Iris, por compartir la experiencia de Costa Rica, que nos enseña el valor de los métodos tradicionales, el valor de conservar la cultura y de cómo implementar estos conocimientos ancestrales realmente nos hace más resilientes, más fuertes para combatir una epidemia como es el COVID-19. Ustedes a través de su enfoque tradicional han logrado mantener la seguridad de alimentos, están logrando preservar sus culturas, están haciéndolo esto como comunidad. Algo que ustedes no han dicho, pero que yo voy a decir, es que el modelo de trabajo de ustedes ha sido tomado como un ejemplo a nivel nacional, ¿verdad? Y está siendo replicado en otras comunidades como un modelo exitoso de resiliencia comunitaria.
Sí,
así que mis felicitaciones. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Now we move to listen from Mina Setra in Indonesia. Mina Setra, as I said, is from Amman, and she runs a very important and interesting project called the Homecoming Project, where in different communities in Indonesia, young indigenous women and men are reconnecting with their land, growing their own food, and also their own medicines. So I would like to invite now Mina Setra, please, to this panel.
Thank you, Paula. Everyone, it's really
Perdón, sorry, Mina. Iris, Marisela, can you please, pueden por favor poner en mute, pueden ponerse en mute, por favor. Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, and it's always nice to speak here, and thank you for Yep also to take us for a short break. It's not easy to come down from sky to earth. So I'm really happy to share what the indigenous youth actually do in Indonesia. in their effort to reconnect with their land and their ancestors and how to best to protect their land. So in 2012, indigenous youth in Indonesia, they have a big gathering and they talk about how they can best defend their territory, because there was a lot of conflicts that time. Excuse me. So they decided that they have to build a movement called Indigenous Youth Homecoming Movement. What is that homecoming movement? Actually, basically, the homecoming movement is calling all the indigenous youth from the cities to return to their communities, to help defend, protect, and manage their territories. Because at the end, if we're not managing our territories, somebody else will. And usually those who will manage our territories, the outsiders, they will come with bulldozers. So first thing that they do, some of the indigenous youth leaders, they went back to the communities and, hold on, I'm trying to share screen here. Oh, can you see? Can you see?
Yes, that's perfect, Mina. We can see that.
Okay. So the first thing that they establish, they return to the community and they start establishing indigenous schools. It starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in few years now we have 55 indigenous schools all around Indonesia. And this in these indigenous schools, the children in the communities, they learn about mostly is the traditional knowledge, how to connect themselves with the spirits, with their nature, with their territories, learn from the elders about medicine plants and different kind of stuff. So they learn from elders, but also from the youth themselves about different kind of knowledge. These schools keep expanding until today. So it just last week we have the 55th new indigenous schools started. They also do plantings in their land, in their communities. And in 2018, we got award from the Ministry of Culture and Education, especially for these indigenous schools. And after that, they're thinking again, what should we do to ensure the resilience in the communities? Many indigenous youth then form small groups of indigenous youth in the communities, and they start planting crops because they think that is really important. It's first, it can reconnect them to the land. They can understand again with the local seed. They can learn to plant with organic farming systems, learn from the elders also how to plant, and it also can create incomes. So these indigenous youth groups, they already have their own incomes, which is actually bigger than the income that they got in the cities. So more and more, from these stories, they inspiring each other and they start coming back home and they start establishing all these local garden or farming in the community level. So you see some of these gardens are big, some are only small or very small group, but different level in different part of Indonesia. And they also establish local herbal garden, and they combine it with the education tourism, like in what happened in Goa in South Sulawesi. So this is a small garden that they built with different kind of herbs, and they plant this. First they document the stories from the elders, and then the elders told them about the function of the plants, and they help also to find the seeds in the forest so they can plant it their small garden. The community, it's become community garden too now. And some of the seeds, they dry it so they can make medicines from it. And mostly in the COVID situation right now, many of our elders, our healers, they gathered with the indigenous youth and teach them how to make ingredients that can boost your immune system, and now and distribute it also in the community. So it is really important, very interesting what they do. And another part of the things that the interesting stories from this youth is they share their stories using social media. So this is some of the Facebook of the youth sharing the stories of how they establish their the garden, their farming, and also they create a movement called smartphone movement. I'm not going to talk about it now because it will be tomorrow. There will be a session with them tomorrow. But I have 1 minute video that made by John Tony Tarihoran about his gardens he make this only using his smartphone.
Yes, please share it with us.
Somebody help me with the video, please.
Jadi kita menebang sawit dan kemudian menanam sawi, kita menanam sayur karena kita juga mau makanan sehat, kita mau makan sayur, kita tidak mau sakit.
Yeah. So
Thank you, Mina.
those are the things that the indigenous youth do, and I have a lot of stories also. But I know we have very short times, but in this, I just want to say, in this time of crisis now with COVID-19, indigenous youth and women are actually the core of the movement of support in the community level. They help producing the health tools, the face masks, they distribute also the support, the food support for communities who are in crisis, and so many things that they do. They are our mobile, I don't know how to say. They are like very, very energetic because they are doing this and that. They can do anything. And that's why we need the youth power in the community. And that's why we call indigenous youth all over the world, actually, not only in Indonesia. Any one of you from community, you can call back your young people to return to community, because who else will protect and manage our territory if not us, the youth, and protect our elders as well. So those are the stories so far. Paula.
Thank you, Mina. That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. I think what we can maybe summarize after listening to our three panelists today is the importance of building on the community resilience by incorporating and really embracing our traditional practices, our traditional knowledge, and honoring the knowledge that comes from our ancestors, but actually not only honoring it, but bringing back to life, using the knowledge that comes from our ancestors to create a resilient community. The examples that we have today from Costa Rica and Indonesia both show us how, by applying the ancestral knowledge today with the challenges we have today, we build resilience in the community, we ensure food security, we ensure access to traditional medicines, we ensure also developing, as our sisters from Costa Rica were sharing, the feeling of one community as sharing, the importance of sharing seeds, sharing foods, and working together. I really love how the youth movement incorporate ancestral knowledge with modern technology, and we have now Facebook groups springing all over the world, sharing, encouraging other youth leaders to start their own gardens, their own homecoming initiatives. So that is truly fantastic. So thank you very much to our panelists today. I think we are a bit over the time we had assigned, and I will just encourage you, all the participants in the audience, please to visit the website of Aman, to visit the website from BICA, and learn more about this initiative both in Costa Rica and Indonesia. Thank you very much. And now over back to our village team to continue with today's agenda. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Paula. Muchas gracias. Now we come to the last panel for today. And again, thank you for staying with us. I still see close to 150 people joining us today. And every 2 years or so, the Equator Prize, you might be familiar with that, is awarded roughly every 2 years to recognize and advance the sustainable development solutions for people, nature, and resilient communities. As local communities and indigenous peoples across the world chart a path towards, their sustainable development, the Equator Prize shines a spotlight on their efforts by honoring them at the international stage. I'm honored to hand you over to Nina Kancheva-Tusheb from the UNDP to help us meet the Equator Prize winners for 2020. Over to you, Nina.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yeb. What a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation of our village. And it is my pleasure to moderate this next panel where we will meet some of the Equator Prize 2020 winners. The Equator Prize, as Yeb mentioned, is organized and awarded by the UNDP Equator Initiative and its partners. And it recognizes outstanding community efforts to reduce poverty through the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Let's watch a short video about the Equator Prize. Great, thank you so much, Calix, for playing that. This year, 10 groups were announced as winners on World Environment Day just 2 weeks ago. And today we will meet a few of these trailblazing organizations that protect biodiversity, address climate change, and promote sustainable development. The winners were selected for their innovative nature-based solutions, They are from all over the world and all share the same resilience in the face of great challenges, the same ingenuity of transforming traditional wisdom into solutions for the betterment of humanity. We will meet 4 of the 10 Equator Prize 2020 winners today. Please help me to welcome them. These 4 winners represent the 3 different categories of the prize: nature for water, nature for climate, and nature for prosperity. Let's begin with nature for water. We'll have a slide up on the screen in a second with the winners in this category. The initiatives in this category include a group from Ecuador that pioneers a holistic model through which indigenous peoples have empowered, connected, and sustained each other in their centuries-long role as guardians of the Amazon rainforest. A group from Thailand that mobilized to protect the wetland forest through community forestry, and a group from Madagascar that sustainably manages its lake and watersheds, achieving food and water security for its communities. The first winner we'll welcome in today is Alianza Ceibo from Ecuador. Alianza Ceibo unites 4 indigenous peoples to protect over 20,000 square kilometers of rainforest in the Ecuadorian Amazon. This indigenous-led alliance forms alternatives to business-as-usual extractive industries and monocultures, provides clean water and solar power to remote communities, and supports women entrepreneurs. Joining us today is an old friend of Ifnadas Denhu in our village, Hernan Olguer Payaguaje, a founding member of Alianza Ceibo and its general coordinator currently. Hernan comes from the Saicopay community of San Pablo, where his people have lived for countless generations. Growing up, Hernan witnessed the effects of oil contamination on his people's health, as many members of his community became sick with illnesses, including cancer, that had only began to spread in their territory recently. Hernan made the most of this unique opportunity to study at university, where he realized that for his people to survive in a rapidly changing landscape, they would need to learn to use modern technology as well as legal and political systems to their benefit, while maintaining a strong cultural identity to keep them rooted in the forest where they have always lived. Hernan, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome you and congratulate Alianza Ceibo once again for winning the Equator Prize. And I'd like to ask you the following question. I'll ask it in Spanish. I know there's translation. ¿Cómo integra el uso de la tecnología en su trabajo para proteger la selva de la cuenca amazónica? How do you use technology in your work to protect the Amazon rainforest? Hernan, a ti, gracias.
Gracias. Un gusto estar aquí con ustedes y agradecer también por el premio, por el reconocimiento que hacemos, el trabajo de la Alianza Ceibo con nuestras comunidades. Muy interesante el panel, los panelistas que empezaron de hacernos entender el sentimiento profundo de los pueblos indígenas en relación a la naturaleza. Nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, para nosotros, a los pueblos indígenas, la naturaleza es uno solo. El ser humano no está separado de la naturaleza, el ser humano es parte de la naturaleza y la naturaleza es la parte nuestra del ser humano, ¿no? Entonces, por eso el desarrollo, la reciprocidad con la naturaleza desde los pueblos indígenas, desde los principios de los pueblos indígenas es bastante fuerte. Por eso creo que hasta ahora hemos sido los luchadores, los defensores para defender nuestros espacios de vida. Nosotros somos históricamente, desde nuestros ancestros, luchadores, defensores de este espacio, esta naturaleza que acobija al ser humano, no solo para vivir, sino que nosotros desenvolvemos ahí en la naturaleza, nosotros crecemos, nosotros aprendemos de la naturaleza, enseñamos nosotros también de cómo tiene que vivir el ser humano y la naturaleza también nos enseña a nosotros cómo podemos vivir en conjunto en este espacio. Y por eso, como le decía, históricamente la lucha consistía a través de los conocimientos, de la conexión, de la espiritualidad que tienen cada uno de los grupos, ha permitido seguir en pie de lucha. Siempre hemos estado luchando con lanzas, con nuestra capacidad que tenemos como pueblos indígenas, y así vivimos, y así nos han dejado nuestros ancestros. Por eso estamos aquí nosotros. Si ellos no estuvieran luchando para nosotros, para nuestras futuras generaciones, no sé, los pueblos indígenas no estuviéramos aquí, tal vez, no sé, solo otra gente estuvieran viviendo en este mundo. Pero gracias a esa lucha de los pueblos indígenas ha permitido permanecer como pueblos en este mundo. En cuanto a la pregunta, sí, como le decía, nosotros para enfrentar actualmente creemos que es importante el tema de la tecnología, el uso de la tecnología que permiten generar herramientas de lucha, herramientas de defensa, y más que todo mostrar al mundo, mostrar a la sociedad la riqueza que hay en nuestros espacios territoriales. Esa ha sido una de las fortalezas que hemos luchado y hemos ganado en diferentes luchas. Por ejemplo, así por decir, nosotros, nuestros ancestros en la selva conocen como si fuera su casa, su ciudad. Ellos saben dónde está la alimentación, dónde está la medicina, dónde está los materiales para la construcción. Y el mundo de afuera, el mundo occidental, no conoce esa riqueza que hay en nuestros territorios. Y por eso es importante el uso de la tecnología, generar mapas que hablen, mapas que dan voz de la existencia de ese lugar, de esa selva amazónica. Entonces es el uso, por ejemplo, nosotros tenemos un ejemplo muy claro de cómo se empieza la lucha. Primero, generar mapas en las comunidades, recabar información, sistematizar y generar, imprimir mapas visibles, mapas formales, y también generar mapas interactivas para que el público tenga acceso para conocer la realidad, la riqueza que hay en esos territorios. Entonces, el uso de la tecnología, el GPS, el drone y programas para crear mapas son muy importantes para la actualidad. Entonces, eso es lo que nosotros hacemos desde la Alianza Seibo con los cuatro pueblos indígenas que hacemos la Alianza Seibo.
Excelente, muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Hernan, for reminding us of the integral connection between humans and nature. We are one. In the West, we've forgotten this a little bit. Thank you for reminding us, and thank you for describing your use of technology. We will move on to the next winner that is with us, and this is in the next category, Nature for Climate. Many Equator Prize winners play an outsized role in protecting forests and ecosystems essential for the mitigation of climate change. This year, we have winners in Canada protecting a 26,000 square kilometer wilderness, an organization in Indonesia working with several indigenous groups to co-manage 20,000 square kilometers of a national park, and in Myanmar, the Salween Peace Park protects over 5,400 square kilometers of indigenous lands and intact ecosystem. We will hear first from Lutselk'e Dene in Canada. After 40 years of advocacy, the Lutselk'e Dene First Nation achieved the protection of their land and waters for future generations by signing co-management agreements with national and territorial governments to create Taidene Nene, a 26,000 square kilometer protected area between the Canadian boreal forest and the Arctic tundra. With us here today is Adeline Jonasson, forgive me. She will speak on behalf of Lutselk'e Dene First Nation. She was chief of Lutelke Dene First Nation in 2006 until 2008. During that period as chief, Adeline signed an MOU with Parks Canada to do a feasibility study on Taidene Nene in 2006 and the land withdrawal in 2007. After her tenure as chief, Addie remained involved in Taidene Nene as an advisory committee member. Today, she continues to be involved in First Nation governance as a band counselor and is currently sub-chief. Addie, thank you for making the time for joining us today. I have a question for you that we would like, if you can tell us about the motivation that kept you going, that kept your efforts for 40 years until you were able to reach that agreement with the government to permanently protect your forest and your territory. On to you, Addie. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent. Very well. Thank you, Addie. We can hear you. Good morning.
Yes, good morning from Sutoka and from Canada. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much, Marcy Cho. And we're very honored to be selected for the Equator Prize. So I wanted to say that first. Over the last many years, we've worked here in the community to protect the land, and that's something that it has been instilled in us since we were youngsters. We were always told by our elders, our parents, to watch over the land. In our language, that means ni ho ni, watch the land. And I think, that has been the most important thing for us here in the community. We wanted to make sure that we protected the land, the water, the animals, the fish, the environment. We wanted to do that so that we have something for our future generations, just like the way our ancestors did. They settled in the most beautiful part of the Northwest Territories, we feel, and we wanted to make sure that the land was protected. So we worked on it for years. We didn't want to see the land destroyed by development. We wanted to make sure that we could still practice our way of life here in the community. We also didn't want to lose our rights as First Nations people, our right to hunt, gather, trap, and fish. We didn't want to lose that. So it took a lot of years to work to make sure that those things that we hold really dear to us here in the community, that we wanted to make sure we worked on, with the government of Canada to make sure that those things we didn't lose, so that our way of life and our way of life would always be protected for each generation. I grew up with a really strong teachings, as well as the other people in the community, and it's passed on through generations right now, is to always protect the land, and we wanted to make sure that we did that. So other thing I wanted to say is, over the years, because we have elections every 2-3 years, each leadership worked on Taitanana. Each leadership worked on a way to try to protect the land. And I think that helped a lot in our agreement that we made with the Minister of Environment in Canada. So I just wanted to say that, and we're very honored. And I'm sitting here looking out towards the land and the water, and I know that future generations are going to enjoy, the fresh water, the fish, the pristine land, lakes in our traditional territory. So I'm very honored that our community was selected for the Equator Prize. So on behalf of my community, I want to say, Marcy Cho, thank you.
Addie, thank you so much. Thank you for your words, and it's an honor for us to be able to share this message, and we really appreciate you thinking for the future generations and protecting this territory on your behalf and all of our behalf. Thank you so much. And I know that it was difficult to connect, so we really, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. Another winner that's with us today in the category of Nature for Climate is from Myanmar, and it's the Salween Peace Park. The Salween Peace Park protects a 5,400 square kilometer continuous ecosystem of protected areas, community forests, and indigenous lands. Based on the vision of sustainable use of natural resources, the park is an expression of Karen indigenous identity, founded upon principles of peace and self-determination. And here with us today, we have the great pleasure to be joined by Saw John Bright from Myanmar, representing the Salween Peace Park. John is an ethnic Karen from Myanmar, where he serves as coordinator for the water governance program with the Karen Environmental and Social Action Network. His research and policy advocacy work focus on fostering inclusive, informed, accountable, and equitable community-based natural resource governance in the conflict areas of Karen State. Saw John recently finished his MA in Sustainable International Development at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts. John, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on obtaining your master's degree. And congratulations to Salween Peace Park on winning the Equator Prize. Today, I'd like to ask you, how have your beliefs and traditional practices inspired the creation of a peace park in your country?
Thank you, Nina. Can you hear me very well?
Very well, thank you. And we
Okay.
see you well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. Firstly, I would like to say that we are very proud. We are very honored that the Salween Peace Park became one of Equator Prize winners in 2020. And I'm also very proud to be a Karen people and part of the SPP community member. Karen people, like many other indigenous communities, see themselves, we see ourselves as part of the natural world around us. The belief, history, culture, and way of life are inseparable from the natural world around us. And, the community firmly believe that the health of the environment directly correspond to their own health and prosperity. If you or a member of your community damage the river or forest, then the individual and often larger community will suffer. So these rules are very much tied to local territory, and each territory, or we call in local language the Gaw, will have a different set of taboos that guide their daily life and relationship with nature. So the term Gaw that we call in local language is the core in community-based governance system in the Salween Peace Park. So the term can be understood in various ways depending on context. It can be viewed as management or governance system. a social framework, and a physical territory. Communities' core territory are its essential and spiritual domain, comprising the lands, waters, and natural resources. Depending on the size, some gors containing multiple villages, core territory may comprise of a number of different land and forests, use type serving various purposes. These can include such as lowland agriculture plots and upland rotational agriculture plots, paddy fields, and orchards, community forests, scared areas, household plots, gardens, public school, road, school, clinic, meeting hall, etc. And pasture and waters, such as lake, water, pond, so these things. So the GOR can also be viewed as management and governance system with a set of institutions that bind the GOR community together. These institutions mediate the community's relationship to and interaction with the GOR's territory, land, and natural resources, promote social orders and support system, and also maintain justice. So the GOR as a management and governance system developed over the centuries, if you look at some literature as well, by each GOR community reflect the GOR's own holistic vision for economic, psychological, social culture, and spiritual well-being. This is deeply embedded in the preservation of the GOR territory itself, which is key to the GOR community belief systems, ancestors, and deities, and therefore their history and identity. The GOR, therefore, is the main reason for this formation and maintenance of an effective governance structure in the Siloam Peace Park. So while leadership positions in the GOR went through election and inheritance, each inhabitant of the GOR territory plays a key role in its preservation. Considering this, one could view the GOR as an ecosystem. Every piece of the system is essential, with the tasks of equal importance performed by both individual households and the wider community. And it is impossible for one entity alone to manage through top-down authoritative approach. So, but the goal is a decentralized ecological system which treats rich biodiversity and current culture as mutually necessary, meaning that through everyday acts in accordance with customary practices, the current indigenous community pursue and maintain a bioculture approach to conservation. So I would like to stop my discussion here so that we can also follow up with other question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate hearing how the community participates in the governance structure of the park and the overall management of your forests. Thank you so much. The final category that we'll present today is in Nature for Prosperity. In this third category of the Sears Equator Prize, winners show that living in harmony with nature and managing nature sustainably can contribute to prosperity and well-being. In Kenya, one of the first indigenous-owned and indigenous-run conservancies has supported Maasai communities with incomes and food security. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Vie Sauvage improves community livelihoods with activities that contribute to the protection of a great ape, the bonobo. And in Guatemala, communities come together to improve their way of working the land using traditional Mayan practices. We're going to focus today, and we have with us from Guatemala, the UTSCHE, Asociación de Forestería Comunitaria de Guatemala, UTSCHE. This is a network representing about 200,000 people, and it supports sustainable agroforestry and practices based on Mayan traditional knowledge and guides advocacy efforts of marginalized communities confronting encroachments on their territories. we have here with us today, and I hope they're well connected, Doña Paulina Parr and Doña Maria Angela Arbal. Doña Angela is the founder and coordinator of the Women's Committee of UTSCHE and a spokeswoman in national and international political arenas. Doña Paulina is the current president of the UTSCHE Association. Doña Paulina and Doña Angela, it is a great pleasure to have you among us today and to hear a bit more from you about the incredible work of UTSCHE. I'm going to ask one question to each of them, and we'll start with Doña Paulina. Your organization is known for an inclusive governance model. Can you explain how this model helps to empower communities and to ensure their prosperity? Doña Paulina, please.
Muy buenos días, con las disculpas de no poder, tenemos problemas con la cámara, entonces solo nos vamos a escuchar.
Sí, está bien, gracias, está bien.
Sí, disculpen, la verdad es que diversas regiones del país comenzaron del 1999 a 2001, se constituyó la organización llamada UTSCHE hoy fecha. ¿Por qué razón? Porque nuestras comunidades se ven en la necesidad de ver cómo poder ayudarnos y apoyarnos en este sentido. Estando solos no logramos fuerza. Entonces nos vimos en la necesidad de reunirnos todas estas organizaciones comunitarias ancestrales a la cual nos pertenece por hecho y derecho. La Asociación UTSCHE de Forestería Comunitaria de Guatemala, llamada UTSCHE, es buen árbol en el idioma, en el dialecto quiché de Guatemala. Fue constituida en el 16 de junio del año 2006, a la cual pues esto ya se formó una red a nivel nacional para las propias necesidades de nuestras comunidades. Bien sabemos que las comunidades tenemos grandes necesidades. Solitos nosotros no podemos, necesitamos a que alguien nos dé el apoyo, necesitamos las ayudas para poder ejercer las necesidades que se presentan en nuestras comunidades, para poder fortalecer las formas propias de nuestras asociaciones de las comunidades indígenas, a la cual como UTSCHE estamos trabajando, estamos luchando, estamos esforzándonos para poder lograr lo que nuestras comunidades necesitamos y asegurar el reconocimiento, el respeto y protección, parte del Estado de los derechos colectivos y tenencias de nuestra madre tierra, a la cual nos debemos por las razones de que nosotros como indígenas, campesinas, estamos bastantes abandonadas en nuestro país, porque aquí en Guatemala, y yo creo y considero que en todos los países del mundo, los indígenas, los campesinos, siempre somos marginados, no se nos toma en cuenta las necesidades precarias que nosotros aquí tenemos y padecemos. Por esa razón es que nosotros estamos aquí luchando, apoyar los esfuerzos de las comunidades y organizaciones asociadas en la protección de los bosques, porque eso es nuestra misión, nuestra visión, nuestras necesidades. Tenemos que cuidar nuestros bosques para que no nos falte, como llamamos nosotros aquí occidentalmente del país de Guatemala, el vital líquido, el sagrado líquido le llamamos, porque sabemos perfectamente bien, si no hay agua, no tenemos vida. No hay bosque, no hay oxígeno. Y sabemos también de que nosotros somos parte de el pulmón del país, del mundo entero, a la cual trabajamos ad honorem sin reconocimiento de nadie, pero eso no nos quita a nosotros el entusiasmo para poder seguir luchando, protegiendo nuestra madre tierra a la cual nos pertenece por hecho y derecho. Promovemos y facilitamos la participación plena y efectiva de las comunidades indígenas, campesinas, forestales y pesqueras, porque como UTCHE trabajamos también en todas las organizaciones base para nuestras propias necesidades, para nuestros alimentos que la Madre Tierra nos provee. Por esa misma razón, UTCHE ha sido y sigue siendo un espacio de encuentro, de aprendizaje y unión, fuerza de las luchas de las comunidades, donde nosotros seguimos luchando, trabajando, esforzándonos para que tengamos lo que nosotros necesitamos. Un ejemplo del valor de este espacio es la lucha de las comunidades. Por ejemplo, una comunidad llamada Pacalaj y la misma comunidad llamada Parcialidad Baquiash, que hemos tenido conflictos grandes y fuertes porque de una o de otra manera no nos dejan trabajar como nosotros ancestralmente hemos luchado para proteger nuestras tierras y cuidar nuestros bosques. Hay madereros que quieren entrar en nuestros bosques, pero nosotros hemos luchado y no hemos dejado a que entren esa clase de gente en nuestros bosques. Tenemos también lo jurídico, a la cual nosotros, eso es lo que nos ayuda la organización para nuestras comunidades donde estamos nosotros unidas. Y también la comunidad. Yo creo que ya terminó mi tiempo, ¿o sigo?
Sí, para poder tener una respuesta de doña María Ángela. Si usted quiere añadir algo otro, podemos escuchar o vamos a doña Ángela.
Doña Ángela.
Ok, muy bien. Muchas gracias, doña Paulina, por toda la energía y el compromiso que lleva esta lucha. Muchas gracias. Entonces, doña María Ángela.
Antes que nada, tengan muy buenos días. Bueno, más que todo mi presentación es a la cual, con lo que ya doña Paulina ya comentó, todo lo que trabajamos en UTCHE, en las comunidades, más que todo a nivel nacional. Ella pues fue muy clara en comentarlo todo, cómo hemos venido trabajando, pero también quisiera comentarles cómo trabajamos a nivel de relacionada a las mujeres. Cómo nosotras las mujeres nos incluimos a la organización. Desde el 2009, 2010, pues hubo una necesidad de que sean incluidas las mujeres, ¿verdad? Como al principio, pues en la organización nos dimos cuenta que en UTCHE pues había poca participación de mujeres y donde también se vio la necesidad de cómo inculcar los derechos, más que todo viendo los derechos de las mujeres, cómo es de que nos damos a conocer las mujeres en un espacio, en juntas directivas, en toma de decisiones, cómo defendemos nuestros derechos. Pues se vio la necesidad de organizarnos como en un campo. Buscamos un espacio donde nos ubicamos en un campo de formación. Donde nos organizamos, pues se vio la necesidad de formarnos en una escuela latinoamericana donde nos formamos, donde nos preparamos en algunos cursos, por ejemplo, en autoestima, derechos, economía comunitaria y varios temas, donde nosotras las mujeres podemos sobresalir y decir, bueno, eso somos nosotras las mujeres, por ejemplo. Porque nos damos cuenta que nosotras las mujeres, pues desde muy atrás, hemos venido, pues, no somos incluyentes. Somos como discriminadas porque por el nivel académico, por ejemplo, no tenemos ese nivel para decir yo puedo. Siempre nosotros las mujeres decimos yo no puedo ocupar ese espacio, yo no puedo ocupar ese puesto, yo no soy buena para una junta directiva, por ejemplo. La dificultad es de que, por ejemplo, lo primero que pensamos, nuestros hijos, quién cuida a nuestros hijos, quién hace las tareas de la casa, quién cuida a mis animales y sin fin de cosas que nosotras las mujeres nos ocupamos como amas de casa. Entonces se vio esa necesidad de que nosotras también podemos sobresalir. Bueno, hoy hoy nos vamos a organizar, al inicio eran 9 organizaciones que nos preparamos y tomamos nuestro liderazgo, a la cual pues se formó un consejo de mujeres como UTSCHE. Y ya organizadas las 9 organizaciones, pues se nos dio la tarea de visitar a otras organizaciones para que las mujeres participen, animar a las organizaciones para que las mujeres también se hagan parte de la organización de base y poder ser parte también de la red de UTSCHE. Y allí fue cuando nosotras las mujeres nos organizamos y poder analizar cómo podemos salir de casa y ir a otros departamentos, porque también hay que hacer intercambios de experiencias. Y en los intercambios de experiencias, pues allí nosotras también aprendemos cómo trabajan otras organizaciones y cómo sobresalen otras organizaciones, como para poder nosotros aprender de otras mujeres y otras mujeres también aprenden de nosotras mismas. Así es como hemos venido trabajando desde el 2009, 2010 a 2020. Así es como hemos logrado nuestros logros y sacar adelante a las mujeres. Por ejemplo, hay mujeres que están hasta en los rincones del país y nosotros tomamos esa tarea para ir a animar a esas mujeres, también civilizar a los varones. Donde no hay mujeres en las juntas directivas, nosotros dialogamos con los varones que también las mujeres pueden estar en esos espacios. Entonces, ahorita como UTSCHE tenemos 41 organizaciones y en esas 41 organizaciones ya avanzamos de las 9 que iniciamos en el 2009 al 2010, ahora pues ya avanzamos con 20 organizaciones de mujeres que ya están ocupando estos espacios en nuestra red. Y así es como nosotros como UTSCHE hemos venido trabajando con las tomas de decisiones y también incidencias políticas, temas de incidencias políticas, cómo incidir en los espacios públicos, cómo incidir en nuestras casas, por ejemplo, tener el orden en familia, porque primero es empezar en familia y luego ir en nuestras organizaciones de base como a espacios públicos ya llegando, ¿por qué no decirlo, verdad? En espacios de gobierno, tomando, esa es nuestra toma de decisiones que hemos venido preparándonos. Así es como nosotras las mujeres, pues, hemos traído esa trayectoria de nuestro liderazgo y saber también cómo movilizarnos en la comunidad, buscando las necesidades de las mujeres. Siempre digo, en una comunidad no viven solo hombres, sino que también hay mujeres, y unir el trabajo con hombres y mujeres para poder sacar el desarrollo de las familias de nuestra organización de base y fortalecer nuestra organización de UCHE. Así hemos venido trabajando y también velar por todo lo que las necesidades, hacer el mapeo que se pide, ¿verdad? El mapeo, nosotros trabajamos con el mapeo, hacemos un censo, diagnosticar y verificar quiénes son esas familias que tienen necesidad, quiénes son esas familias que en realidad reciben esos beneficios como UCHE, que nosotros los llevamos en las comunidades. Entonces, así es como nosotros trabajamos, y ya lo dijo muy claro doña Paulina, y así es como nos hemos organizado como UCHE, lograr logros. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, doña María Ángela. Muy, muy interesante de escuchar cómo ustedes se organizan como mujeres para incidir las políticas en la familia y en las comunidades también. Apologies. This concludes our session. We're at the end of our session. I want to thank UCHE, Doña Paulina, Doña Ángela. I want to thank Adeline and John and Hernan for your participation in the panel today. It was a very, very meaningful to hear from you. I want to announce that we will please look out for the Equator Prize event, the official Equator Prize event, which this year will have to be virtual, sadly. It will take place during the General Assembly in September. So please make sure that you sign up for the Equator Initiative mailing list and you get in touch with us so that you can participate virtually. We will have each of these communities be featured and receive the prize, albeit virtually. And with very much gratitude from the whole Equator Initiative team, very happy to have been here with you on to YEB again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina, and thank you once again for all the inspiring winners of the Equator Prize for 2020. You give us great hope, and that is such a fitting wrap for today's event through a celebration of your amazing, amazing contributions, our dear friends. Now, as we witness and partake of the stories and the conversations today, I want to give a shout out to all of our live bloggers out there. All of them from indigenous communities are live bloggers sharing their local perspectives on ourvillage.us. And thank you to all of you for joining us both on this Zoom call, on our social media channels for this celebration of our oneness, and this homage to those who believe in a better future for all and in defending the earth. Please make sure that you register for, before you go, we still have something in store for you at the end of this program. So don't just go away yet, but please make sure you register for tomorrow's final event, Day 5 of Our Village, the virtual edition, when we talk about how communications can and must be used as a tool in our quest to save our planet. So see you all tomorrow. And if you are moved to support the local communities, then please donate to the Roots That Heal fundraiser. And please check out and buy the photography prints for communities online. All of this information you can find at www.ourvillage.us. So this has been Day 4 of Our Village. This is Yeb Sanyo, and this is AG Sanyo, and let's check out his concluding masterpiece. That's his artwork after the whole session we've had today. I hope you like it. This is a picture that features an indigenous woman leader from Panama, as you've seen in the chat box. Thank you very much, AG, and maybe show yourself in the camera and just say hello to everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoy.
So that concludes AG's mural for today. One of many he's done in the service of our indigenous sisters and brothers and our planet. This is Yeb Sanyo once again saying, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you so much, and may you all have a wonderful journey. But don't go away, as I said, just yet. Please enjoy this performance of indigenous music from Tendoki. Tendoki, take us with you. So Tendoki is trying to connect from Sulawesi, I understand. Tendoki, over to you.
Gongi Melo, Manasu Muraka. Okay, we are Tendoki brand from Indonesia, South Sulawesi, Toraja. Tendoki means our dream. We are indigenous youth who decide to go back to our homeland, practicing, preserve, and celebrating our culture. With our music, we mix traditional instruments with modern ones. By doing this, we protect our identity as indigenous people of Toraja. You can do this in various ways. Okay, for semangat. The next song we call Marendeng Maramba. This song telling about our principle, life of indigenous people in Toraja. Our homeland, Marendeng Maramba. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We will be now playing a video from them. Thank you so much for today, everyone.
No sound, Hugo.
Okay, sorry, it's not working. I suggest we close this anyway, and we thank everyone for a very good day together, and we'll see all you tomorrow, right? Thank you.
Thank
See
you, guys.
tomorrow. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Very nice. Thank you,
everyone.
Hugo and
Thank you, everyone.
Sophia.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Take care.
We're still on live streaming. Can you kill the live streaming now?